Hi, this is John Reed. This is the final chapter of the Reaching the Informed B2B Buyer ebook and my final audio reading on the topic, though there's also the wrap section on where do you take it from here, and I've already recorded some of that, but this will be all on the same final file for you. One of the things that I did during this reading, and in addition to trying to make it informal and interesting for you where I could, is I added updates where I've thought about new information and angles. And you probably have some questions about have my views on AI changed a little bit, because some of my stances on the use of AI for content are a little hardcore in this book. Yes and no. AI has become really a specialization for me in terms of enterprise projects and analysis. And generative AI is definitely a big part of that, though not the only type of AI that I've been studying over the last couple of years. And I do see a lot of value for AI in certain areas of marketing and content strategy. It's just that for creating the kind of content that really makes a difference in this particular book, most of what I've covered here, I don't think AI is very good at generating the core content, including the expert points of view and the more humanized, outspoken, or even like slightly humorous or human takes on issues that I think are so integral to earning attention. But there are a few things in there that I covered, some of that more like helpful content, FAQ content. I think perhaps AI can help with the generation of some of that if the data sources are good, and there's some supervision of the final output in some of that as well. But I do think AI can do a whole lot, and I've tried to work a little bit of that in terms of, for example, transforming into different media, so multimedia options, transforming into different languages and stuff like that. So I have tried to indicate the areas where I think AI is useful. And I think AI can be very useful around personalizing user preferences and to some extent the proper distribution of content based on triggers and stuff like that. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that I definitely am still looking at that and impactful on that. And I'm open to where this journey goes. I don't really have a dog in the fight. I just am interested in how we reach as many folks as possible with compelling stuff that makes a difference in their lives. And if AI can help with that, I'm all for it. And, at Diginomic, we've written about how we do and don't use AI in our own content, and you can check that out online if you want. So with that, let's jump into Chapter 8. B2B buyers trust their networks, but what about your brand? I've taken pot shots at the idea that there's a structured buyer's journey, but it absolutely makes sense to deliver content for prospects, customers, and their networks without overthinking their real-time context. Your job is to focus on your topic authority and on the questions customers are asking, questions that content can solve. As buyers strive for informed decisions, they contact peers and experts and consume their content. This has two disruptive implications. One, when buyers are ready to press ahead, they turn to those they trust. And they do that first, perhaps before they search and research on their own. They'll find us when they Google our SEO optimized keywords is not enough, especially now with the onset of AI inline search and stuff like that. If someone in the network doesn't vouch for your company, you may not make the shortlist for that particular buyer. Or they may ask an advisor to do some of that shortlisting for them or help them with it. And if that advisor doesn't know you or doesn't have experience working with you or doesn't have a good experience working with your vendor contacts, then good luck with that. Buyers might ask for input on a LinkedIn thread that your team is not part of. Maybe it's a LinkedIn group your PR agency has been kicked out of for excessive link blasting. I've seen that before. The second one is become proficient in a different kind of content. And we've talked about empowering your employees and employee experts to share content, and they'll evolve into thought leaders and relevant experts themselves without pushing brands and products. And yeah, you will lose some of them to other companies. There's no doubt about that as their profile increases. But the freedom you provide them with will also be a terrific recruiting tool, especially when so many companies still have the content muzzles on. When we asked Michael Brenner, who is the author of the Content Formula, calculate the ROI of content marketing and never waste money, for his look ahead, he gave us a similar take. Employees are the next content producers. He says, leading brands have already committed to answering their customers' basic questions. They are outperforming their peers in organic search rankings, and they have earned traffic without having to pay for it. The next problem they are trying to solve is how to scale that success. And the solution is sitting inside their organization, employees. Employee-generated content, or employee activation as I call it, allows brands to scale their marketing success. It recognizes the passions and expertise of their employees to attract new customers and the top talent who want to work for a company that activates their employees. So that's what Brenner has to say on that. And we've looked at how to reach buyers, but how should buyers approach these issues themselves? How should they navigate B2B decisions, given the consensus approach to buying brings in new stakeholders who have their own agendas? The best thing a successful buyer can do is to avoid tunnel vision. Avoid over-reliance on any one vendor or services partner. Involve independent advisors throughout the process of software acquisition and implementation. Some buyers are just too heads down on deadlines to make it to trade shows and in-person networking events, but they should always get someone from their team out there. Fortunately, online communities can help to bridge that gap. For buyers, it's about two complementary approaches. Deepen your trust networks outside the vendor relationship, and further the vendor relationship itself. Test the relationship early and often. Look for advisory type of relationships with vendors, not just sales pitches. Challenge vendors to re-earn future business with a high caliber relationship through sales, go live, and support. At Gartner, Hank Barnes' data indicates that trust networks really matter, but there's an art to getting independent info without getting bogged down in complexity. He writes, part of being a smart, informed buyer is leveraging diverse opinions. Go to independent sources to validate claims, to test and get clarification. Embrace different perspectives, but also be clear on what you're trying to learn from each of them. Because if I just go out there free form, that's when I get lost and fall into a rabbit hole. But if I'm looking to validate, is this as easy to roll out as the vendor is saying? What are the tricks for adoption? I go looking for specific information to confirm those claims. Burning questions and thoughtful answers carry the day. And yet, too many B2B marketing teams are falling short. Why? Because, as Brenner says, educational content is outside the branding comfort zone. He says, research shows that buyer journeys are not predictable or linear. They involve more people than we realize and require lots of validation. The decision maker often needs to educate other business functions to justify his or her decision. So that is a content opportunity, not a marketing one. Every brand I audit is completely inadequate on educational content in the early stages of the buyer's journey. What is the problem? Why is it important to solve? How are other businesses like ours solving this? What is the value? None of these answers involve marketing spin or promotion, but they all require a commitment to educating buyers so they can validate their decisions with others. Final thoughts. What bot lies ahead? And I put bots in parentheses there. So where do we go from here? And don't say chat GPT, please. Yes, text generation chatbots, as well as AI image generators, will be an asset to marketers, but only up to a point. Good text bots fed with the right data can occasionally generate an interesting headline to consider, or a few passable paragraphs of copy. But your content needs a higher bar than that. Without bullshit's Josh Burnoff. By the way, I changed the name of the website after I read this book, but I like that name, so we'll keep it for now. He recently advised writers on how to stay one step of the new wave of chatbots. What makes writing worth doing? Original insights, AI doesn't have those. Engaging prose, AI is weak on that. Wit, AI still lacks that. A good list, but it doesn't end there. Additions include a compelling story or narrative, AI stinks at that. Satire, AI can only guess at that. Subjectivity/honesty, inserting your own experience into your theoretical constructs. Generative AI is incapable of that type of theoretical framework now. And the honesty that comes within that of acknowledging your own shortfalls is another key thing that I think humans can do effectively to gain trust. And I think on the satire part, that's really overlooked. There's a need for humor and satire in our industry, and you can check some of that out in our hits and misses that I do every week. At any rate, I think that's a good list of things that raise the bar a little bit, but also kind of shift the goal of what enterprise content should look like that makes it more possible to achieve it and achieve that kind of attention and relevance. In other words, show some guts and craft and own up to your own bias. Does that sound like any bot you know? Heck, many human marketers in the enterprise struggle to capture those characteristics. For superior content, a better place to go next isn't bots. It's injecting the customer success method with media assets. Barb Mosher-Zink and I have a friendly disagreement about this. Whenever I press the need for more thought leadership content, she tends to push back by pointing out that in the era of the subscription customer, we need content that engages across all those phases from prospect to customer to support and on into renewals and upgrades. That's a fair comment. So why did I stress buyer engagement content in this ebook? In an era of infinite media and limited attention spans, it's the most compelling content any brand can produce. It's also the hardest, at least until your team gets into a rhythm. Once you learn how to extract stories from customers into non-branded lessons, then it's not so hard anymore. It's also the kind of content Diginomica specializes in, and we've seen the results at that firsthand. Though I focus more on written content in this ebook, I could have easily included multimedia and events. I've written extensively about the do's and don'ts of virtual and hybrid events. Obviously, events are a great way to generate content and turn audience members into a real community. And also, I didn't note, but there's a lot of repurposing of content across different formats and languages that can be really powerful and that can really help your excellent content go further. So the investment in that content excellence can have a bigger payoff. And obviously, there are some uses there with generative AI in terms of translation and moving content into different formats. Sometimes needs a bit of supervision and quality control, but it can be a real help there. I also didn't spend much time on content curation, but that's not because I don't believe in it. I have an ongoing Diginomica series on curation, filtering, and breaking through the noise. However, I reject the notion that simply curating the content of others replaces the need for your experts to create their own original work. For similar reasons, I didn't get too deeply into peer review communities such as G2 and Trust Radius, though they've had a big impact on how B2B prospects evaluate companies, particularly among SMBs in the mid-market. And I probably didn't spend enough time on user-generated content in general. A thriving community, once you achieve it, will solve some content problems semi-permanently by fleshing out your product information and maybe even your corporate narrative. Communities do consume resources, however. The best ones require experienced moderators to keep the outspoken conversations you want civil. Facilitation then becomes a really important skill in all of this, but I don't think that replaces the need for your leaders and experts to engage in that community, sharing new methods and ideas. Obviously, content assets require an effective distribution mechanism. If AI can help you deliver the right information at scale, then there are no objections here from me. I just hope that brands will be realistic about it, rather than fantasize that they can hyper-personalize everything, but that's a topic I've already conquered. So why wasn't content distribution and social media engagement a major focus of this book? Because I find that brands are actually pretty good at getting content out the door to where it needs to be. It's the caliber of that content and the underlying content strategy that remains the biggest challenge. I didn't spend as much time on content attribution and measurement in this ebook as I could have. There is plenty out there on proving content ROI. I find that Parsley has the most useful free content on this topic, and you don't have to be a customer to partake in it. It's not always easy to measure the ROI of thought leadership content. I'm not going to lie about that. But that's why I included a couple real-world examples in the proof points chapter. That said, it's not as hard to prove content ROI as some marketers think. Measuring actions from content spans from tracking follower increases to webinar signups, from quality backlink acquisition to increased traffic referrals. In particular, the value of contextual linking from third-party website content should not be underestimated. Contextual linking means that link contains keywords that you specialize in, and hopefully points to deeper resource pages than your homepage. So I guess what I would say about all of that now is that while it's not easy to prove content ROI, you know it when you do it, in the sense that when you put out great content and engage around that content, you can feel the power of it. You certainly can do that after like a great event or a great virtual live event. And by the way, there's so much more possible in virtual live events than most brands have ever figured out, even during the pandemic. And I've written a lot about that on Diginomica, as well as how to make more of virtual events and online events, and in person too, so you can check that out. In a recent piece with Planful CMO's Rowan Tonkin on CMO-CFO collaboration and where it breaks down, we return to that tricky problem of attribution. And you can check that article out on Diginomica too, by the way. To pursue the approach I've advocated here, marketers will certainly need to make the case for ongoing content and social engagement investments. Tonkin and I tried to solve attribution, and I don't think we did. But you could lock the top CMOs in a room for a month, and I'm not sure they could solve it either. It's still a really important discussion, and you can definitely make progress on attribution. And the more progress you make on multi-step attribution and how content assets tie into all of that, the more you can directly tie content into leads and into deals. And it absolutely can be done. And then you're sitting at a much better picture in terms of content marketing ROI and much more investment in content as a result. Even if you personally interviewed every new customer, the amount of attribution touch points that lead to a B2B sale can never be totally nailed down. But Tonkin is right. Capturing self-reported attribution data from prospects is valuable, even if it is incomplete. Econometrics may have relevance here, providing visibility into areas where branding and attribution get hazy, especially in a data privacy context. Still, the power of dark social will continue to make accurate attribution of buyers' trust networks difficult, even though we know that content, search, and community and trust is a potent, direct influence on B2B sales. Tonkin also advises a deeper look at high-intent buyers, understand their prospect journeys, and their attribution touchpoints. I agree. We can get distracted by a deluge of data from low-intent buyers. Best to start with those most likely to purchase and understand how they found you and bought into your software, and ultimately your community as well. But CMOs shouldn't stop there. I'm not sure some CMOs understand the power of engaging with buyers outside of the funnel. On the other hand, when the light bulbs do switch on, it's amazing what can happen, such as a CMO community like the Next CMO, which Planful is cultivating. Some of the smartest CMOs have sidestepped these attribution pressures via KPIs on qualified leads. If you overachieve on delivering qualified leads to sales, who cares whether you spent more on content and social engagement than attribution models can validate? Old school? Maybe. But that's not a bad way to protect a marketing budget until your attribution models can validate what we already know. Kick-ass content that ties into your value proposition chain is everything. For now, attribution models remain an art form. Understanding how people move from visitors to community members and brand advocates is a big, big piece of the puzzle. So is understanding how an industry analyst or so-called influencer can move from brand hostile or indifferent to engaged. The type of content I advocate in this book should not be considered a separate all-new content pipeline. It's really about building on bold brand narratives and tying those themes back into the rest of your content engine, from webinars to events. Quality content can be extended from the social conversations you spark. As for repurposing, that can work, and I've talked about that, but I'm not a fan of copy-paste and cross-posts, not when it's so easy to mix in new updates, including the latest social media exchanges. Before all the hype about the end of cookies, I was already pushing this opt-in community model. Now that legally compliant first-party data is a pressing issue for marketers, I see another level of validation. A couple of years ago, when we asked Robert Rose how his views on content have evolved, he struck a similar note. He said, "The one place where my thinking has evolved is how even more important owned media is these days. First-party data is becoming incredibly important in terms of how we target messaging and understand our customer. But with new privacy and data guidelines coming online, acquisition of this data from partners will only become more complex. But I'm really looking forward to the year ahead and how brands, especially in B2B, will begin to add owned media platforms as products to their suite of solutions in order to acquire more insights into customers." Well, that's a good note to end on. I hope we provoked fresh thinking and heated discussions about your content strategy. Our goal was to bring that dialogue forward. We can all serve enterprise buyers better, so please reach out with your thoughts and reactions. You may get lured into a podcast or included in an updated version of this ebook. And honestly, drawing readers like you into this dialogue was perhaps the biggest reason I wrote this in the first place. Anyhow, that's really a wrap on this ebook for now. In a little bit, I'm going to get into the final about the author and editor stuff and also the disclosures. So if you want to hear that, that's coming up. But before I do that, I just wanted to say thanks for listening to this. I hope you found the audio format helpful. I really enjoy doing things in an audio format as well. So maybe there was a way to kind of revisit this material and rethink it from that perspective. And I would look forward to your feedback on all of that. It was fun to do this on my own and to do it without using an AI voice. And I hope that my own sort of passion for this came across pretty well and made it an entertaining read for you. And I did try to insert a few things where my thinking has evolved, because my thinking has evolved a little bit from where this has come out. And like I said, I'm going to be blogging a bit on Diginomica shortly on this whole issue of relevance versus entertainment in B2B content, because I've had a few advances in my thinking there. And then if you're listening to my podcast series, which you might be if you're listening to this, I've done a bunch of recent videos on workshopping personalization that get into a lot of these topics from the personalization and AI hyper-personalization angle. And I think there's been a lot of additional issues and fun debates that have surfaced in that informal series also. And I'll eventually write about some of that on Diginomica, but for now you can check out podcasts or video versions of all of that. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and let me know what you thought of it. And if you want me to add anything else to this series over time, I'll be happy to do it. Okay, see you for now, and I'm going to get into the final credits here. Disclosure: at the time of publication, Salesforce, Zoho, Planful, Sage, and Acumatica are all Diginomica Premier partners. About the author: John Reed has been building enterprise communities since '95. These days, John is a roving blogger analyst. He also advises vendors and startups on reaching today's informed buyer now that the sales funnel is discredited. He's a Diginomica co-founder, enterprise irregular, and purveyor of multimedia content. John is an advocate for media over marketing. He sees Diginomica as a chance to disrupt tech media with the BS-weary enterprise reader in mind. About the editor: Barb Mosher-Zink is a senior content marketer and marketing technology analyst. She works with a range of clients in the tech market and actively tracks and writes about digital marketing, customer experience, and enterprise content management. And she's a regular contributor on Diginomica as well. And I wrote the book. It was edited by Barb, and then we had additional editing by Stuart Lachlan and Chris Middleton, layout by Diginomica of the D-Book, and Diginomica and the logo are trademarks of Diginomica Limited. Follow us on X, LinkedIn, and so forth, and thank you very much.